This week, Trey Ford joins us to talk about platform security, as well as PaaS and hosting. Next up, Jarrett Rodrick discusses how you can jumpstart your SOC analyst career. In the enterprise security news, funding announcements from Security Scorecard, Secure Frame Access Security, Orca, Silera, Vulcan Cyber. A non-funding announcement from Thinkst, Fortinet acquires ShieldX, VMware acquires Mesh 7, wow, say that 10 times fast, Capado acquires New Context, KnowBe4 is filing for IPO, Exabeam launches the first ever, according to them, comprehensive use case coverage. Linksys and Fortinet form an interesting partnership. Sonatype targets more secure software supply chains with a 5-part announcement. CTO.ai launches serverless Kubernetes platform, and more. Stay tuned for that and even more on this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. As your attack surface stretches from the data center to the cloud and the device edge, security teams need visibility across it all to confidently detect and respond to threats. Experience frictionless hybrid security that helps you stop breaches 84% faster with ExtraHop's Reveal X360, the first and only SaaS-delivered network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. JumpCloud offers a cloud directory platform that gives users a single identity for their email, apps, network, and work device. Whether Mac, Windows, or Linux, JumpCloud gives IT admins a single pane of glass to configure and secure those devices. With JumpCloud, remote onboarding and offboarding goes from hours to under 5 minutes and puts zero trust security within reach for organizations of any size. Looking for a directory that supports heterogeneous OSs, or you need just SSO, MDM, LDAP, or MFA? JumpCloud will make your job easier. Try it out for yourself at securityweekly.com/JumpCloud. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. It's episode number 221 for March 24th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Mr. Tyler Shields is here with us.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day.
And you've got like a dad joke on your whiteboard.
Yeah, I've decided to go from advertising, which I had been putting up there, to labeling in some dad jokes. So yeah, French fries aren't from France, they're from Greece.
I love it. Adrian Sanabria is here with us remotely. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, excited to talk about news today. Is going to be amazing. You know, numbers don't have any meaning. You know, dollar signs. Really excited to have Trey on here, though.
I am too. Before we get to that, our next live webcast will be held on April 29th, 11 p.m. I always say 11 p.m. 11 a.m. Eastern Time is when we do our webinars. And it will prepare you to learn how to prepare for modern ransomware, if that makes any sense. You're going to prepare for modern ransomware attacks. Brace yourselves. That'll be with Jake Williams, Adrian, and myself, securityweekly.com/webcasts. Get updated on ransomware, and our archive is available at securityweekly.com/on-demand, where you can access the archive. Joining us today is Trey Ford, VP of Platform Strategy and Trust at Salesforce, here to talk about platform security. The last time I saw Trey, I walked past him at RSA, and I was like, hey, Trey, and he had no idea who I was because I was incognito with glasses and a goatee and a hat. Trey, welcome.
Howdy. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Trey. Thank you for joining us today. Now, what's interesting, I look for excuses to talk to my friends, right? That's really, if you haven't clued in on this from the Security Weekly Network, I bring them on as hosts, I bring them on as guests, and it's a very interesting excuse, not that we need an excuse to bring Trey on the show, but I was registering someone for a vaccine, and I don't know if anyone has done this, right? But the security aside, the vaccine websites get really overwhelmed because they'll open up a certain number at a certain time. Everyone will hit the website all at once. And look, if you think you can build a site that's going to handle that situation, you think it's easy, you're crazy, because this is hard stuff. So I was getting all these errors from the different services and the application itself. And one of the errors was from Heroku. I'm like, hey, wait, I know someone that knows a lot about that platform, and I'm like, this is an interesting discussion. Like, how do I secure my applications when they're on these other platforms? And all these questions started flooding my brain. So, Trey, if you could start out maybe with a little bit about your background, how you came to Heroku, then Salesforce, and like a brief overview of the platform for those that aren't familiar with it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me again. So my name is Trey Ford. I work for Salesforce. I've been there, almost 5 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. I joined Heroku as the head of trust. So I oversaw the SRE organization as well as security. And when I started, we had just the common runtime infrastructure. So Heroku was at the time a massively multi-tenant platform as a service. So I guess super broad review for public cloud infrastructure. You've got SaaS, things like Salesforce, Gmail, applications delivered. SaaS, platform as a service, SPI. SaaS, platform, PaaS in the middle, and then infrastructure as a service below, which is your AWS, your Azure, your GCP. So in the middle, platform as a service is effectively an opinionated way of taking people's code and applications and running them. So from a security standpoint, think of this as RCE, remote code execution as a service. We are effectively running anybody's code. So you don't need to port scan us. You don't have to worry about getting code execution. We just give it to you. So from a security standpoint, when you start looking at things like Heroku, from a security standpoint, we're thinking about this from two principal perspectives. One is maintaining positive tenancy isolation boundaries, keeping your code to yourself in our multi-tenant world. And then, of course, we've got our single tenant world, which is enterprise security oriented, but also maintaining positive control of our control planes. So from a CSA, Cloud Security Alliance perspective, our meta structure is just for Heroku employees, for Salesforce employees managing that infrastructure. So background and how I got here, I'm a security specialist, but from any specific discipline, I'm more of a generalist. I've worked and built response organizations. I tried my hand at conference management, not something I recommend to anyone I love. Special events is its own thing. I've done product management, sales engineering, hands-on consulting and auditing, some pen testing. I was a tool jockey. I don't write my own exploits. My background's in systems and networking. So at Heroku, we are effectively the fastest way. We like to think of ourselves as the fastest way to go from idea to URL. So your developers shouldn't be thinking about how to patch operating systems or how to manage firewalls. They need to be writing code, writing unit tests, preparing to Paul, your point, building code and applications that surprise and delight customers and scale beautifully. And that's more than enough work for any one individual or team.
Yeah. Trey, so when you say platform as a service, I can run my containers or Kubernetes in Heroku, but can I do functions as well? Like, would you just run my Python code? Like, do you do both or one or the other?
Totally fair. So we were a little bit early on the container concept. So our common runtime stuff is actually LXC. So we're using Linux containers. So we'll take your code, bundle it up, and deploy it. We will, of course, support your Docker containers. Kubernetes is a lot bigger infrastructure problem to solve, and we don't want developers thinking about that. Our opinionated approach is let us run your code. You worry about the code.
Gotcha.
Then from a function standpoint, we're working on some stuff that we're bringing to market called Salesforce Functions. The real magic and unfair advantage that Heroku has is we are a Salesforce property. So we're working towards integrating the Heroku capabilities into the context of Salesforce. So having an awareness of which Salesforce cloud, which organization, which context we need to be operating your code within. We're moving towards that functional capability now.
How much control does the user have over the security bells and whistles, I'll call them, right? Because we all know, listening and sitting here, there's a lot of tuning you can do that impacts security in either a positive or negative way. Like, what are some examples of some features you provide, Trey, to give people control over that?
Wow, that is such a huge question. So the Cloud Security Alliance drives this notion of a shared responsibility model. And so when you start thinking about how to operationalize the deployment and production management and the security program around a PaaS deployed application, you need real clean alignment on that. So we like to use the Cloud Security Alliance cake, their consensus questionnaire that maps their control matrix out to all these different regulations, whether it's PCI or NIST or any of these others. And the idea is that you can nail down, kind of a racy format, responsible, accountable, who owns which pieces and who's going to be informed of those things. So the developers, we have a couple notions of role. And again, very, very opinionated, trying to streamline and make this simple. Everyone wants more. The idea is to narrow focus. Again, you want developers working on the applications. So the administrator is going to have the ability to select what type of service. So in the database world, you're looking at what types of database pairing, following, how many backups, that kind of stuff. The developers, of course, can control the pipeline. Enterprises are going to want to run their own CI/CD type of pipeline management and security testing and all that stuff. But when we start getting down towards patching, that kind of stuff, what's below the waterline, so to speak, the things that Heroku's taking care of for our customers, you need visibility into understanding what decisions are made. So they've got stack images that they can select, or if you're building a corporate image into a container and you want us to run a Docker container, that gives you a little bit more control. But that's a really broad space, Paul. And so we've built a lot of documentation around trying to describe where our responsibilities hand off to the customer, and it's up to the customer to implement how they want to do that. But we take a lot of the AWS level stuff off the table for you.
Yeah. So do I choose like my database version of my SQL, or I have the option, it sounds like, to either like let you handle it or have control over it.
Yeah, so you do have some of that. So Heroku Postgres, I guess stepping back, Heroku is a platform we're going to run your code. There's a whole bunch of things in our add-on ecosystem that, if you want to use Heroku's Postgres, if you want to use MySQL, if you want to use Heroku's version of Redis or from Redis Labs, however you want to integrate these things, you do have some notional selection there. For our enterprise offerings, we do give you the ability to allow and deny list specifically what your developers are going to have access to.
Gotcha.
So that does narrow that a little bit. Again, we're looking to try to take as much overhead and cognitive load off of the developers as possible to make things easy, make things fast.
Yeah, that's certainly from a developer perspective appreciated, right? Because I find so many cycles can be lost troubleshooting the platform. I mean, just last week, we lost, I don't know how many hours in development collectively because we're troubleshooting the platform, right? Corrupt file system was just, a nightmare. Maybe we need to run on Heroku, actually. You've convinced me already to start.
Look, there's so much to do. And the question is, how much control do you need? To sound academic, there's a Pareto frontier. There's an 80% breakpoint where you don't need to make 80% of the choices. Like you're selecting what your language is going to be, your architecture, all these different things you're going to build out. There's a handful of times that you need additional control or additional special edge cases. But my argument is for 80% of the applications, take some of the variables off the table. Just make it simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do you have templates? Like my example, the thing that keeps me up at night is as a developer, I am writing some code, I'm putting it on a platform, and maybe I've had some input into that platform. Like I want to run a secure container. I want it to not be root, and I want it to not run with privileges. But like site reliability engineers or ops people have the ability to change those things. And as the developer or security architect, I'm like, well, wait, who controls these controls that when we were in development, everything was secure, but now it's moved into production and people can change these aspects. Do you have like a management, like a templating kind of thing?
I think there's a lot less available than you'd think. Again, at the very start, when I mentioned that positive control of our infrastructure and our control planes, and of course, tenancy isolation are our two principal missions for a platform security organization. We're not going to allow you to do anything that's a threat to the hosting platform underneath. So how you configure the application to run inside the container is your business. You're not going to get out of there. You're like that. That's the purpose. We've got this in our bounty programs.
Yeah. So let us know. You tightly control. Yeah, because a lot of those heinous container vulnerabilities I mentioned really speak to the integrity of your entire platform. Yeah.
Correct. And so container escapes are something we're aggressively instrumented for through a variety of means. I don't know that a whole lot of that's under NDA. We've had a number of our speakers at Black Hat talking about how we think about that, but that's something we're instrumented for. That's our business, is running hostile code in our environment, building hostile code in our environment. We're one of the oldest and most battle-tested platforms out there doing this.
That's really awesome. Tyler, Adrian, questions for Trey?
Yeah, I love the tagline from idea to URL, quickest idea to URL, because my introduction to Heroku was literally somebody doing that in a matter of hours. And I had no idea what Heroku was, and he had an idea, and a couple hours later he was like, messaged me and said, "Oh yeah, so here's my idea." I was like,
yeah,
what?
it's funny you bring it up that way, Adrian, because I had the exact same experience. I was developing something. I was like, oh yeah, let's just throw it up in AWS. We'll set these things up, start running through this, build a container, get all that set up. And the particular person was like, why aren't you just using Heroku? So it was this similar kind of like, oh, moment, right? And maybe this question is out of bounds for Trey, so please feel free to throw it out if it is. But is there any significant deltas in the demarcation point of ownership of security between like how AWS approaches it and how Heroku approaches it? Have you thought about that, or is it similar kind of concepts?
I like the way you're thinking about that in terms of demarcation, and like most important in a demarcation is clarity on where that breakpoint is. And old world data centers or on site, when you go into the cross connect closet, where the telco hands off to you. And I think that's the hardest problem in public cloud infrastructure, is achieving this notion of shared responsibility. Where do I hand off to you? This is the modern web concept, the Web 3.0 concept of API contracts. Where do I stop being responsible? You're going to run into this in production engineering and site reliability organizations. Where does the developer and their total ownership model hand off to the production engineering team? So similar construct, I think that the Cloud Security Alliance probably has the best description and construct for that for IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. We've put together a document that's been published. We're using the Cloud Security Alliance CAKE, that consensus questionnaire. Again, total sidebar, non sequitur. I love how everyone has their own custom questionnaires, though it's going to protect them from things like SolarWinds. So using a standardized questionnaire that we can all agree on that maps to most regulatory standards, I think is a very positive thing. And more than answering the question is owning who owns which part of the responsibility, what decisions are being made on my behalf, and how do I validate against that? And we've taken the step to make sure that our SOC and our ISO audits involve and engage that to confirm that we're executing on those duties.
So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit on you and ask a question about adoption of Heroku. It actually doubles back to what some of the stuff that Paul was saying about can I just run my small little section of code in your system? Are you seeing a shift in adoption that's taking us from monolithic, large, single container, large apps that have just everything in the kitchen sink jammed into a single container? I presume you're seeing a rapid atomization of the app into multiple containers and a breakout of the structure of what an application consists of. I think that's a given. But where I tend to live 5 years in the future, and my belief is that we're going to see more API-centric mesh models. Is that something that you're seeing? And if so, how is Heroku positioned to deliver on that?
Wow, so many questions, Tyler, and I thank you for all of those.
I don't mean to give you hard ones, my man.
No, it's great.
Questions I'm working on. So
the joke I would bury is that didn't PCI teach us to make sure that every server or instance was kind of its own duty, but that's just lost in this forum.
I'm glad Jeff isn't here.
Yeah, right.
Fair enough. So to answer your question, I think a lot of folks, as we look at digital transformation, all the marketry that we hear. Folks are moving out of data centers. And so there's a lot of monolithic apps that are moving. And so there's a right and a wrong way to do that. I think AWS has done a good job giving frameworks, like the well-architected framework, to think about moving towards public cloud architecture. Moving your app to the cloud is not going to solve your problems. It's going to make them worse. It's going to make them faster, and accountability is going to be a lot more swift. So to your point, yeah, I think monoliths are being torn apart. I think that atomic services are ideal. I think we're seeing a lot of folks moving to more API mesh type of relationships. We have some of our more legacy code at Heroku even that we're wanting to move towards a multi-master, multi-region, segmented type of API architecture. You're going to have single points of failure that emerge. And so, yes, that's the pattern that we're seeing the enterprises moving towards. I think that's the logical and correct direction. And I think this informs part of what Paul brought me here for, is notionally, as you start making these changes and as you start really moving towards internet scale, things break really funny. It's like the law of complex systems. You're going to have emergent behaviors. Things are going to feel very different in those scenarios. That's a great question, Tyler.
Yeah, and then so the natural follow-on to that question is visibility and continuous observability of what's going on in that environment. And I think getting ourselves into a position where we're out, I'll use the term outsourcing, but we're not really, but building into a system such as Heroku, let's put it that way, gives us the ability to have a I guess, a single management plane maybe, or a single plane that allows us to view and continually understand the state of operations of our application infrastructure. And that is something that I think people need to strive for, both at a large enterprise level, at the developer level, but certainly at a large enterprise level across the board, like what is in your environment, right? So I'm definitely a fan of using these bigger, I guess, broader platforms to centralize on. So excited to see Heroku, and wonder, can you maybe comment on the visibility of what Heroku can provide and the management tier on it?
Absolutely. So first, I think it's important to underscore, you're completely right. Monitoring and observability are a cornerstone. In the public cloud, regardless of the tier you're operating on, if you do not have strong identity and strong observability, you are deaf, dumb, and blind. Like there's a tree's going to fall in the forest. You're not going to be aware. You're going to have nothing. And so having strong logging, strong telemetry, metering, observability has so many terms buried into it from different teams and different needs. I think it's real important to deconflict that, but yes. So what does Heroku have available at the gate? Salesforce and the rest of our developer experience, we're working on consolidating all of our offerings across the rest of the Salesforce developer community. I think Heroku brings some of our best of breed forward. So first and foremost, what you're looking for is the cleanest path to drain logs out. And that's part of what our private and shielded infrastructure, our single tenant infrastructure was designed to do, is to remove any of our infrastructure and give you direct drain so you can just forward all of your logs straight out to whatever observability platform you're looking for. So if you start plugging in APM or any other metrics engine to get telemetry and uptime and any visibility you can into the various performance aspects of your application, I think that's a critical path. I think some of our classical security controls where you're looking for span ports and that kind of stuff is going to create a lot of overhead. And I don't know that's always the right place to do it. But that's absolutely the right direction to go. And I would be starting with a visibility first. If I can make a kind of cultural reference, as we move towards DevOps, security is going to be best if we treat it as a defect category that we empower the engineers that own these services to run with. Something that's deep in our culture is this notion of a total ownership model, and there's a lot of interpretations around it. But as it turns out, Tyler, you and I are not going to be the people on keyboard troubleshooting and fixing the code in most of these enterprise environments. It's the team that owns that specific group of services in partnership with production engineering. And so the more we can give them the visibility, advanced notifications, something's not quite right, something's misbehaving, something's unstable. Back pressure and other things are really hard to detect as you scale, and you're going to learn. So creating that positive feedback loop, empowering those folks to see and learn about what's happening. It's a virtuous cycle. They're going to feel a lot more safe letting you know when something's wrong. Security doesn't have to be the leading edge for any of this detection.
It's a great lead into my next question. And how deep does Heroku go into telling me about vulnerabilities in my application? Could be a container, could be in my code. I know platforms vary, right? And then there's a million tools that can tell me all kinds of things about my application. But what does Heroku provide?
Right. So Heroku does have pipelines. And so part of our team offering is giving you that kind of CI/CD pipeline experience and giving you the ability to build a standardized pipeline with dev, test, and prod environments on our platform. All positive in terms of in-house integrations, whether you're going to go GitHub, GitLab, any of these others that are going to start giving you those additional hook points. Your source code management is going to be your responsibility. Your source code testing, whether that's code analysis and review, third-party plugin and library management, that stuff's all going to fall on your side of the responsibility. We're not a platform that's doing that, specifically because every enterprise has its own standards, its own code bases, its own tool selections. And while we may be a polyglot hosting platform, we're not a polyglot security solutions engine. And so it's going to be important for you to understand your environment and then make sure that you're instrumenting your pipeline for your organization. We have a number of things that are rudimentary to help people. It's that rising tide raises all ships kind of thing. Like for folks that don't have pipelines and don't have separate environments, we try to make all of that easy. But once you start moving towards enterprise accountability, you're going to need to build those hooks.
Yeah, I actually like that as a focus, because I think some of the other providers give you like just enough to kind of wet your beak kind of thing, but it's not an all-encompassing solution. So I kind of like, if I would go to my developers, look, you meant Heroku, but pointing out vulnerabilities in libraries and source code, we still need our own solutions to do that. And I like Heroku to be hyper-focused on getting my app up there and in front of users as quickly and stable as possible.
I think that's an industry level challenge, and no disrespect to any of the analyst communities out there, but we don't want to be something to everybody. We won't be the best at absolutely anything if that's the case. I mean, case studies like Novell Border Manager firewalls, loved them, hated them. What you really, really want to do is do a handful of things really well. Like every other Heroku engineer, if I had a nickel for every time I was told, hey, I built my own Heroku, a lot of organizations are going to achieve real value at scale by building their own hosting platform. And Heroku is a term of art that was kind of the vanguard. But it's my position that we're looking for at least common denominator in a handful of offerings. What we want to be is really rich in our developer experience, really rich in our integration points that allows folks to pursue excellence in their specific areas, that allows companies to make really smart, informed decisions.
Adrian?
Yeah, so first off, the span port mention kind of cracked me up a little bit. I feel like span ports are like the headphone jacks of InfoSec, right? Yes. They're starting to disappear from devices.
Love the analogy.
and services. And some people are okay with it, and other people are unhappy about that. So I feel like it's a good analogy.
PCAPSR didn't happen, Adrian.
Right.
Yeah. Right. You don't necessarily need a span port, but that's probably a different conversation. So what I'm curious about is, as a PaaS service, what do you think the best way of educating your users in terms of security and just avoiding foot gun type situations is? Because it feels like, unless I've missed something, Heroku hasn't really had an equivalent to kind of the S3 disaster that Amazon had with just a wide range of companies having breaches that were entirely because they didn't configure S3 permissions correctly, or maybe they did it on purpose and just weren't thinking about what data they put in there. But certainly some of those were probably unintentionally, the ACLs were unintentionally public. But I remember the first time I logged into AWS and it was like, hey, this root user you have that has access to everything, you might not want to do that. So they actually pop up in the UI and tell you, like, I didn't have to go searching in documentation for that. They're like, you're doing something dumb. Okay. You probably need to change this. So, but I imagine that's kind of a, something you have to balance, doing some enforcement and some gentle guidance versus really good, concise documentation. So just curious about your thoughts on that.
It's a great question, Adrian. I think you raise a number of really important things. First and foremost, I don't think it should be the responsibility of our engineers that are software developers to understand the bounds of networking, to have to keep up with all of the different moving pieces and changes and features and API endpoints and new services and default configurations for AWS. It's shifting sand underneath. It's important to understand that as you're managing up and managing down, Heroku's kind of caught in the middle. And so any platform you're going to look at is trying to provide a stable development environment that handles a lot of the operations, manages down aggressively to take a lot of this off the table. And so when I say opinionated, there's a lot of freedom there, and I think it's really, really important. And for some developer populations, it's really, really frustrating. So old school draconian security, where we told people what they could and couldn't do, was probably sold very poorly. What we're doing for the Heroku customer base as Salesforce delivering this for our developer community, we provide an opinionated experience where you can't change S3 bucket permissions. You can't define where database backups are going. You can't change any of these IAM configurations. You're not interacting with any of it at all whatsoever. You're connected in. We're handling everything else for you. There's a handful of things you can turn on. We start with very publicly documented defaults that deals everything from security groups and VPC pairing and MTLS opportunities, access patterns and architecture patterns for application design and how we integrate things. And there's always room to raise visibility. But I think part of the magic of something like Heroku, so any platform you're going to see developed in-house or source elsewhere, what we're trying to do is remove the cognitive load, all the additional decisions and the fatigue that comes with trying to identify, to inventory, to educate. That's a lot of wasted energy. We believe that if developers can turn caffeine into code and code into revenue and value for mankind or for their company, we're best empowering them to narrow their focus and pursue excellence in their craft and take everything else we can off the table.
If it were always that easy, to just convert caffeine into code, I would be the best coder in the world. I'm just saying.
I mean, I love the food analogy because it's me every time I go to any kind of like build your own thing, kind of fast casual restaurant, like our favorite poke bowl place or, Tex-Mex place where they're like, what do you want? Anytime they have something on the wall that's just like, here's a thing that's already built. You don't have to make any decisions. You just choose this thing, and like we'll put the 14 different ingredients in there in the right amounts. I'm like, yeah, that. Any given day, I have to make so many decisions. It's I feel like it's the same there. Especially if it's like an idea to URL type of thing. That's kind of a different use case from a monolithic production application. That we're going to plan and build. I would think you'd want a lot of that. Hey, let me just get this pre-built thing off the menu.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the framework, right? So taking Heroku as a use case, our infrastructure and our customer account surface area for AWS, I think, is roughly 700 AWS accounts, probably more by now. You think about the tens of thousands of IAM and additional configs that happen underneath. They're all based on a handful of profiles. It's fully automated. Our account management system is quorum-based control. No single person can take terribly too many actions. Every non-idempotent, every significant administrative change on a control plane requires a 2FA press. There's alerting and peer reviews that happen on absolutely every code change that affects our infrastructure. Do you really want to build that and get it perfectly right? Like, there's a lot you want to take off the table. There's a lot that you want to get there. No solution's perfect. But what we strive for is transparency. We're all on a security journey. And you want someone that's going to talk to you about what dog food they're eating, what mistakes they've made, and how they're learning and growing, and to gather that feedback. Again, I still believe the highest calling in our profession is to make those conversations safer.
Trey, we could absolutely continue this conversation, and we're just going to have you back. So I wanted to thank you for appearing on the show today. That was awesome. Great information about the Heroku platform and really the benefits, which I think is what I was lacking. Like, why? Why would I use that instead of something else? I think you really helped paint that picture very well. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
And with that, we will take a short break and come back with our next interview about getting into the SOC. Stay tuned. Do you worry about ransomware, data breaches, reputation damage, especially from phishing attacks, on employees working from home? The facts are, top cloud security tools have a 15% failure rate. 51% of phishing is social media based. Pixum knows because Pixum detects and stops breaches at point of click. Pixum's AI real-time solution detects actual fraud happening in a browser and stops it. Know your real security gaps. Get a phishing actualization test free at securityweekly.com/Pixum. That's PIXM. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, you can now access all of the content on demand, whether you registered or not, by visiting securityweekly.com/unlocked. You can go there and get all the great content. So do that. Jarrett Rodrick is a retired cyber network defender and cyber warfare specialist in the U.S. Army. Today, he's going to walk us through the first steps you can take to become a cybersecurity SOC analyst. Welcome, Jarrett.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul.
It's nice to have you on the show. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for your service.
I appreciate it.
So, Jarrett, what got you interested in developing materials on how to be a SOC analyst?
You know, I never thought about it personally. It was something that my co-author actually approached me about. So this was his project. Tyler Wall, shout out to him. Couldn't make it today. You know, it was his project. He wanted to get a new influx of talent into the workforce, right? That's something that both him and I agree upon. And when he approached me to ask to co-author his book, you know, I thought about it for about a minute. I was like, yeah, I'm in, because it's really something I've noticed since leaving the Army and joining VMware, that, you know, we have a shortage of talent, of new young talent in cybersecurity, specifically the SOC.
Mm. Yeah, there's so many different aspects to getting people interested in coming into cybersecurity. I think the SOC is a good angle to take. I think a lot of the recent discussions have been around, how do we get people in all these other areas? But what we're talking about, is it entry-level tech is kind of what we're talking about, right?
I think it is, right? I think that when you're looking at the paradigm of knowledge needed to be a security engineer versus a security architect and a SOC analyst, the lowest barrier of entry is SOC analyst. And both Tyler and I agree that is where we want to focus on. How do we start a career in cybersecurity? Well, a SOC analyst is the best way, because you don't have to know everything about a SIEM, or you don't have to know everything about an IDS. You can come in and learn that stuff along the way and move up the ladder, as it were, in that field.
Yeah, and you don't have to necessarily stay in tech either. It's kind of one of those, I think, tech inroads into cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that people have to have a degree or experience? Like what's required to kind of get the bare minimum to even feel comfortable applying for a junior SOC analyst?
That is a great question. And if I can share a little bit of my background, I have an associate degree with general studies. Nothing in my college time was prepared me for being a SOC analyst. So, I don't necessarily think that a college degree is required. My background came from reclassifying into the Cyber Network Defender course with U.S. Army. That was a fire hose. Frankly, it was 14 weeks long, 7 SANS courses back to back.
Yep, I'm familiar with that program. Wow. Yeah,
it was a fire hose. And in preparation for that, if I can share a quick anecdote, there was a lot of terms that I didn't know. I was a combat arms soldier, and I actually subscribed to Enterprise Security Weekly so I could, hear these terms that are common in this new field I'm joining, and then I would go afterward listening and Google them and learn what they are. That's
you
what
already
I did in preparation for the course.
You already had thousands of military acronyms rolling around in your head, and then you took 7 SANS courses back to back to back.
Yeah, it was a fire hose drinking from it, right? So, 7 SANS courses, 5 GX certifications in 14 weeks. It was baptism by fire. And over the years, luckily I didn't have to pay for those. The Army paid for them. But over the years, I've accumulated 11 SANS courses and 9 GX certifications from the Army. So, it was definitely a benefit to, in lieu of going to college, SANS really provided the education I needed. And then the Army provided the hands-on experience that was required to join the industrial cybersecurity force.
I like your comment about the acronyms, though, because if you've ever tried to talk, let's say, with like one of your neighbors or friends that's not in cybersecurity, like even if you practice it, sometimes you just can't help but use some of these acronyms and terms, and then you're looking at the person you're talking to, and you're like, "Oh, I just lost that person," right? And to us, even the most basic ones are kind of second nature, and I think that's important to call that out to enable people to come into our field, Jarrett.
I think so. And, luckily the Army helped me prepare for that as well. Many of the network owners that we were working with during my time, I was working for Army Cyber, specifically the Cyber Protection Brigade out of Fort Gordon, Georgia. We were working with network owners that weren't necessarily technical people. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we had to do was, put it in layman's terms that anyone could understand. And, I know, personally, I've been asked by several people, especially during the pandemic, I'm working from home. It's, we're able to continue work, thank goodness, through this pandemic. And there's people that can't. And those people are like, well, how did you get in this field? Because this is something I might want to look into. And, that's the point of the book. The book isn't for, your listeners, Paul, to be honest. People who listen to your podcast are in this field already. This is for the people who are asking them, like, I see you working. I see that you were able to continue this work during the pandemic. How do I start that process and get in that field without having to go back for 4 years of college? The book addresses that. The book is, it's meant for that primer to get, that first step in the first foot in the door.
Yeah, it is funny. When I worked for Tenable, and you got to tell people what you do. It's like, oh, I work for a vulnerability management company, and they're like, wait a minute, what's vulnerability management? That's a great example of like just how sometimes the silo. So does the book address some of that, Jarrett? Sorry, Ty.
It does. It covers. It doesn't necessarily tell you how to answer that question. Like, what do you do? What's exactly what does you do for your company? But it does talk about a day in the life of a SOC analyst. Mm-hmm. Right. This is what you can expect. Here's some prerequisite skills. Not necessarily things that are college course driven. This is what an IDS is. This is what a SIM does. Yeah. And this is how it's important to your day-to-day operations as a SOC analyst.
Tyler?
Well, I was just gonna comment that, let alone double clicking to intrusion detection or anything, or when talking to my colleagues and neighbors, I usually just end up saying I work in computers, right? I mean, the eyes are gloss over at that. I would love to see some additional research, and I don't think it's pertinent to this book, but the path to success for SOC analysts starts at exactly what you've written. And I love that kind of, how do you get in? How do you get involved? And I think that's super important to help get people excited about solving the problem of lack of resources in cyber. And then I also would love to see research done, whether it's by you or by, some colleague of yours, that talks about the growth path for that similar role. And how do you go from step 1 to 2 to 3 to, really being the expert in your field and whatever that means with regards to a SOC analyst. I think someday, as we continue to fill in those resources, it would be very valuable for people to grow in that manner.
No, I 100% agree. That's
I know that's not a question. You can just agree. It's fine.
No, we do talk about the progression of a SOC analyst in the book through different SOCs, right? And different. We talk about the difference between a corporate internal SOC and an MSSP versus even what's expected of a SOC analyst in the U.S. military or a federal service. So, each one is different. That progression looks very different for each one of those. A SOC director in MSSP is not equal to a SOC director in an internal SOC.
Yeah, and then you're starting to even see expansion into application security centric SOCs, and like there's all sorts of different abstraction layers that get layered on top. Go ahead, Paul.
Absolutely.
Well, I was just saying, there's a lot of parallels into healthcare too. And Ron Gula was on, I believe, last week, right, talking about data care was one of the things that he's promoting. And I like mirroring some of the aspects of a healthcare career to cybersecurity. That, like, not everyone needs to be a brain surgeon, right? There's lots of other opportunities to get into the field. But I like your book a lot because it gives people a perspective into like what it's like to work. And my wife runs into this. She works in healthcare, and she started out in X-ray. And she'll tell stories of like, people come in the X-ray program and they think that's what they want to do until they have to step foot into an X-ray room and see someone's bone sticking out of their leg. And a smaller percentage of them go, yeah, that's not for me at all. Like they just can't deal with it at all. So to give folks who may want to come into cybersecurity, Jarrett, that kind of insight into here's what it's like, I think is a positive way to do that. Because even in a well-established field such as healthcare, they still have that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about that. Now, you're not going to see bones sticking out, hopefully
not,
as a SOC analyst. But, we have seen some weird stuff come across emails, right? Some phishing campaigns and some other odd stuff come across. That's a story for another time, off air, maybe.
Yeah. But also, my wife, too, she'll explain. She does sonography, ultrasounds. And a lot of people just haven't spent the time to understand, like, what's the difference between an X-ray, an MRI, a CT scan, and an ultrasound. And I think it's the same thing when people come to cyber, like, wait, patch management versus vulnerability management versus threat intelligence. What do all those terms mean, right? And I think having work such as your book that explain that is very positive.
And we do. We go into the different external and internal teams you might interact with on a day-to-day basis. We talk about compliance, governance, risk. We talk about vulnerability management versus security engineering, security architecture. We even go into some of the three-letter agencies that you will, interact with in the case of an incident, right? So, we do cover all the, second and third layer abstracted teams you will interact with.
What are some of the stories in there that you're particularly fond of, Jarrett?
My favorite chapter is the final chapter. And what we did, and this was actually 100% my co-author Tyler's idea, and he coordinated all this. We have a compilation of short stories, SOC stories, if you would. It's and the first one is my favorite. It's by Khalil Davis. He's a young SOC analyst, 2 years experience, no college degree, no technical certifications, and he got his foot in the door. And he's progressing through that ladder that many of us have already progressed through. And, his story, I hope, serves as an inspiration to the readers of our book that, it doesn't require hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, and it doesn't require dozens of technical certifications to get in this field. It takes, a personal drive. It takes the ability to research on your own and, doing the work, putting the work in to get in this career. And this career is, ever growing, thanks to, all the different compromises and the news stories out there that, X was compromised, Y was Y company had that breach. So, it's ever growing. And I hope people, the readers of our book, take that as inspiration.
Jarrett, do you think folks require that there's some aspects of the hacker mindset or culture to work in this field? You just gave some examples, right? You've got to be persistent. You've got to be able to research on your own. You've got to be curious. Does that apply for most people who may want to aspire to work in cybersecurity, in your opinion?
I think it should, right? I don't think you need that to come into the field, but I think you should nurture that and build that want to learn how to compromise a certain system or how to, circumvent a security control to better understand how the security control works, right? To better monitor and think about, okay, if I see this alert trigger, this is what it means. That was something I told my soldiers when I was, on my way out of the Army, was if you just put in the 9 to 5, you're going to be mediocre at best, in my opinion. You need to have a passion for this. If this is what you want to do, then your passion is going to dictate how high you can go. But to your point, yeah, I agree. I think you do need to have that hacker mindset to be successful in this career field.
And I think one of the drivers for that is the pace at which technology and cybersecurity moves, that there's always something new. And I think one of the great qualities of a hacker is taking something that you may have no idea what it is and go, wait, I got to go learn that, right? I mean, I've interviewed hackers that have studied how your ears and brain process audio. Audiology? Is it called audiology? Right? And I'm like, do you have a background in that? And they're like, no. I wanted to look at the security of natural language processing, so therefore I read all these books and then applied that. I feel like you have to be willing to learn new things all the time, and I think that's a lot of fields, right? But our field moves really, really fast because we're kind of alongside of, or however you want to put it, with technology.
Absolutely, right. We have a whole chapter dedicated to the cloud and monitoring the cloud. Mm-hmm. So, as an example, right, with the Army, we never dealt with the cloud. We had started moving into the AWS GovCloud environments, but we weren't responsible for monitoring that yet. And coming out and going straight into VMware, where cloud is prevalent, it was a learning curve, right? I had to go and learn the AWS platform. I had to go and learn the Azure platform, and the logs associated with that. It's, to your point of, a hacker wants to dedicate, a bit of time to learning one subject, and they do that on their own. We have to be able to do that as well. But the bigger the bigger difficulty for us is that we have to do it across multiple different technologies, right? A hacker can focus on one technology and get really good at it.
This is what I'm interested in. I want to go hack some satellites, so I'm going to go learn how to, yeah.
But as a defender of a network, you need to know all the different entry points into your network. You need to know what lateral movement will look like in your network. You have to basically work through the entire APT kill chain and understand, if I was put your red hat attacker hat on, and how would I do it in this network?
Right. Or even just understand the technology, Jarrett. As a defender, I go, you look at the assets on your network and you're like, wait, what are those? Those are time clocks. Well, wait, how do those work? Like, I gotta go figure out how those work. Yeah, Chronos, right? Yeah. To be able to defend it, I'm like, wait, I gotta understand how it works.
Chronos on networks.
All the time, right? I guess it was a pretty good example. But like, I gotta go learn about that to see how it functions. Sure, I can go ask people, but like, I gotta go do some research on it, right? Because it's on my network.
Absolutely.
And you got to put on that attacker hat and think, okay, now how can I abuse this?
Yep.
How would it benefit someone to abuse this time clock? Because on the enterprise side, a lot, like everybody thinks you're getting hacked by Russian hackers all the time, and you're defending against nation states. And maybe that's more true nowadays. But when I was a chief incident handler, it was all internal stuff. It was all, hey, HR says this person is, doing something,
cheating on their time card, right?
Could you go, read their email, or, like I worked a couple stalking cases. There were people dealing drugs internally. Every now and then you got to work with the FBI, but more often, like you just needed to understand, even those insider threats, which I think gets downplayed a lot because those don't get announced as breaches because they're not really breaches, right? But they happen all the time. And of course, companies aren't going to share them, but I don't know if that matches with your experience, Jarrett.
100%. Right. So, when I stepped into VMware, let me take a step back. When I was working for the Army, insider threat was one of the bigger, driver for most of the incidents I was part of. With that, not every insider threat is malicious. A lot of those you just realized was user error, and it caused, admin left a loophole open, and it was used by a tech savvy person, or it was found as a vulnerability, and it was investigated as an insider threat, but wasn't an insider threat. So when I stepped into VMware, a lot of our detections were around external threats, and something I've been trying to champion from the inside is, we need to build our insider threat monitoring portfolio a little bit better. And that, putting that attacker hat on of, if I was a malicious insider, what would I do? Based on the permissions and the privileges I've been given inside the network, this is the route I would take. And then we build, as a SOC analyst, trying to improve our monitoring portfolio, we build those use cases and those detections around what I would do as an attacker.
Jarrett, tell us a little bit about the book. Where can you get it? How do you consume it? How available is it?
Sure. It's available officially this month. You can get it from apress.com, Barnes and Noble, or Amazon. It's $35 for the hard copy. I believe $22 for the ebook. And we would really appreciate if everyone got the word out about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I did see it.
Fresh talent.
I did see it on Amazon. It did not have any reviews yet, and it has recently been released, so that's understandable. But yeah,
I just ordered it because I've got a few mentors that are literally looking for trying to get their foot in the door in SOC jobs right now. And I'm on a weekly basis working with them on what they need to be doing. And as a mentor, like I need a better framework for how to train them because, back when I was on the enterprise side, it's been long enough now where I never worked in a SOC. Like SOC was a shared role for everybody in the InfoSec teams that I was on.
We were the SOC
back in the day. Right. And I guess we kind of did. Like after we got the SIM, we did have people pretty much dedicated to doing threat hunting and SOC-like roles. We just didn't call it a SOC. But yeah, I'm hoping this is something that can help me with mentoring and maybe something that I can send to some of my mentees also for them to read through.
Well, hey, I appreciate the support, Adrian, and I hope it does pay off for you and it helps the people you're mentoring.
Thanks for putting it out there.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Jarrett, for coming on the show. The book is Jumpstart Your Analyst Career in Cybersecurity. You can find it on Amazon. And if you just Google search for it, you come up with all kinds of options. I like Adrian's idea of giving it to people that you're mentoring. And I think it also kind of fosters that notion that we should be mentoring people. So, Jarrett, awesome stuff. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Coming up next is the Enterprise Security News. Stay tuned. When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Searching for the best way to protect passwords and privileged accounts? Thycotic empowers security and IT operation teams to discover, secure, and manage all types of privileged accounts with the fastest time to value of any privileged access management solution. Get up and running fast with solutions for privileged account discovery, turnkey installation, automation, auditing, and reporting tools with Thycotic's free 30-day trial. Thycotic, the fastest growing PAM provider in the market, available both on-premise and in the cloud. Get started today with a free Thycotic secret server trial at securityweekly.com/Thycotic. We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, check out all of our shows on the network, including Security and Compliance Weekly, Security Weekly News, and others. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, and join our Discord server, all at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Also, if you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, please submit your suggestions for guests at securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a regular basis. And actually this year have featured several guests from that particular forum. So keep up the good work. Alrighty, just a couple of news articles to cover this week. Lots of stuff going on in enterprise. There's no slowing down for cybersecurity, which is good. I think it's a positive thing. So let's start with funding.
Security. I'm really finding my flow with these with the notes, though. I've sorted everything. Everything's labeled now.
You've sparked some features that I've been wanting to add into our software for some time. I want to be able to kind of categorize and tag stories. Has been something I've wanted to do, and I think that helps host and listeners. Like, if you want to go. You can go to our website and see all of our notes that we use for all of the shows, and having some of those things sorted by, like, I want to just read the funding. We'll start there, see who's getting funding, see who's getting acquired, right, and then read about the new features that we found. There's certainly for this show some distinct categories of the articles we cover.
Well, and just using text to label them, I get that from you. I think that was a great idea. You know, once you've got a dozen or more stories in here, you know, you need some way to organize things.
Absolutely. Security Scorecard snagged $180 million Series E, which is interesting.
Yeah. So this is a space where, you know, we're actually going to do some product reviews on this space. But this is one of those spaces where it's really interesting, because on the compliance and insurance side of things, people are really interested in it. One of the players in this space got acquired by MasterCard. Mm-hmm. You know, but a lot of security leaders are really split on it. You know, I've got to say, I've met more security leaders who are wary of it, you know, who, you know, don't really think that you can, you know, that these scores can be accurate given the limited data and the limited visibility you have.
Right. Like, how can you tell me that company's secure or not? I think most companies in the world would struggle with that question themselves.
Well, I mean, it's almost like the enterprise equivalent of profiling someone, you know, just based on, you know, like police profiling, just looking at somebody. Like, you run into a lot of those issues with bias, you know, that are going to come from that, you know. So they're trying to say it's science, but, you know, I don't know. It's tough because there's so many factors you can't see. But I guess that's the $290 million question, because that's how much funding Security Scorecard has raised, and it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Could we equate this to or compare it to, like, just generally the credit Equifax size of market, right? Is the cybersecurity scoring, credit scoring, so to speak, is that an equivalent total addressable market as what Equifax is trying to tackle on the credit scoring side of the house?
Not,
You know,
maybe.
I mean, I think it's maybe not the same, because that's more about individuals, individual credit scores. I mean, business credit checks are also a thing, but this is entirely B2B, so it's still huge, right?
Right. That's what I'm getting at. Is it still a big enough total addressable market that 290 million does make sense, because then it ends up informing the debt market, the insurance market, all these other things that look at the consumer credit reports. Is it similar markets that are going to leverage the scoring market on the B2B side in this case?
And I think the important question here is, do people care how accurate it is? Or do they just want to have a number, something that they can work with?
Yeah, and
I don't think individuals will care. I don't think an individual buying from a company is going to give too much of a hoot to the cybersecurity score. But I think it really enables, again, insurance and other larger markets to make more educated debt, to make more educated decisions.
I mean, more of the customers of the product. Are they going to care? Or is it more important to them to have some way to classify? And for them, they don't necessarily care how accurate it is. They want the ability to say, hey, we've done some due diligence.
Yeah, it's all about the accuracy, or how if you have a score, you just need to know how accurate that can be, right? Not necessarily accurate, but how impactful that score is. When we talked about it last week on Paul Security Weekly about software, tell me if that software or that hardware device that has software, is that secure or not? And there's a lot of ways to measure that, but if you can measure enough things to be relevant enough to go, that device is not secure because there's default passwords everywhere and heinous stuff, but this device is more secure than that one, right? I don't think we're ever going to get to this is an awesome level of security because we looked at everything. You just got to look at enough factors to have something meaningful. And I guess that's the question, whether it's security scorecard or government regulations or other initiatives that are looking at it in terms of what's the one that looks at the electrical things? What is that called? It tells me somebody's not going to blow up, right? There's
United Laboratories?
Yeah, UL. Yeah. So is it more like a UL rating, right? How do we apply that to companies? How do we apply that to devices and software?
I think it's more of a ISO 27000 type of thing.
That too.
Just because you've gone through ISO 27000 doesn't mean you're not going to get breached. Just because you're PCI compliant doesn't mean you're not going to get breached. But it is some kind of baseline. It shows you've gone through some kind of process where you've thought about these things. It's had some impact on your security. And actually, in this case, this is entirely outside. These people haven't interacted with Security Scorecard, but yet Security Scorecard is giving them a rating, right? So it is a little bit different from certifications that people, a SOC 2 or something like that, where you actually seek it out, and work to get it.
All right.
But I think that's my hot take. That's my prediction, is that I think it'll be used like that. So how accurate it is will be less important than, just what that score looks like. And companies will be incentivized to do some work to bring their score up to a B or an A or whatever.
Yeah.
And it might not be stuff that makes them more secure, realistically.
Just improves their score. And are those the
they're
same
now
thing?
going to have extra work to do to make sure they've got an A with all three of the big security scorecard vendors.
All right. So we got through one story. 20 more to go.
That's an important one. I mean, that's a whole category.
Yeah, we opened with a big one there.
A big one. Let's see some other funding announcements. Secure Frame raises an $18 million Series A in cybersecurity compliance.
Speaking of, we were just talking about SOC 2s and ISO 27000, weren't we?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's not sexy at all, but very valuable. I mean, SOC 2 and ISO 27000 can be very painful. So any kind of service or tool to help you through that, I think could be pretty popular.
That's a super crowded market, hyper crowded market, and deal sizes for those types of companies are sub 10K annual deal sizes. So for an $18 million I can't talk. I give up. For an $18 million Series A, it might be tough to end up justifying a growth rate there. That market's a tough market.
That's interesting. I didn't realize the deal sizes there.
Well, I mean, they can get bigger. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are bigger ones, but they tend to be on the smaller size because it's such a hyper-competitive market today.
Because there's a lot of people that want to simplify your cybersecurity compliance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, where I see these companies exiting into the TrustWaves of the world, right? And the SecureWorks of the world, where they've already got this huge customer base, that they're ready to throw at this thing.
That's a good point. Israeli-founded startup Axis Security raises $50 million, putting some more money, as you say, Adrian, in the SASE pot. And Zero Trust.
In the SASE pot.
The SASE Zero Trust SD-WAN cloud identity management.
I don't know if it's just a generational thing, but I was a bit uncomfortable with an Israeli security company being called Axis. I don't know if that's just me, but that made me, I don't know.
Are you saying they might make a pivot? Is that?
I don't know, man. It's maybe I played too many World War II games or something like that, but it just seems like an odd choice for a brand. Anyway, I overthink branding sometimes, so we'll leave it to that. But yeah, certainly a hot market. SASE, it looks like they've got a few pieces of the SASE thing. SASE is a huge and complex beast, but yeah, it looks like they've got like the CASB piece and maybe the ZTNA piece.
Orca Security. Are you guys familiar with Orca?
Yeah. I'm really, really familiar with Orca. Yeah,
I think I've heard you talk about it before, Tyler. So they're now a unicorn at a $1.2 billion valuation, and they raised $210 million as a cloud security company.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact months and dates, but I want to say it was like 20 million in May of last year, like 90 million in maybe 50 million or 90 million in December of last year, and then 170 just now. Mm-hmm. I mean, that in under 12 months, 210 million in 3 rounds is absolutely insane. I hope their revenue growth rate went from like 0 to, I don't even know, 50, 70 million in ARR in like 12 months, which I know it hasn't, but I hope so. Otherwise, they're going to be on a treadmill they can't keep up with.
Agentless side scanning technology reads cloud configuration metadata and workload runtime block storage to identify vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and all other bad things.
It's basically just a Cloud Sec 2.0. It's a Cloud Sec, cloud security posture
CPSM?
Management from the outside in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And they're going to go head to head with Wiz.io in that space. They're going to beat each other up because they're both multi-billion-dollar unicorns on, I don't even know, so let's call it under 10 million in revenue.
What's the TAM on that space? Both those companies have huge valuations.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy because they're also going directly up against Prisma Cloud for that space, right? It's not that the space is brand new, but they're reinventing how it's done, which I get, and I have a lot of respect for. But those two are definitely going to be fighting a knockdown, drag-out battle there.
Yeah.
Some funding in the healthcare IoT cybersecurity space. Speaking of TAMs, it's a very, very specific space, and it seems that healthcare security gets kind of its own subspaces. It's like one subspace of cybersecurity that hyper focuses on healthcare. And I mean, I get it. There are unique challenges certainly too.
Yeah, you kind of have to, right? Yeah. Like with regulations, you have to speak the same language as the healthcare folks. Yep. Like you have to understand how their networks are built. You can't just go in there selling like you do to a bank. Yeah,
and I think ICS is the other similar kind of model where it's a whole subspace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, OT.
Yeah, Silera secured $17 million in funding. Yeah, I do see a lot of funding in healthcare cybersecurity startups. So,
Yeah, that's pretty healthy number. I mean, generally the more niche stuff, we don't see, as large a seed or Series A, but 10 million that's a pretty healthy Series A.
I like the non-funding announcement because it was different.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I worked at Thanks for a year and a half, and I know Haroon well. And one of the reasons I wanted to go over there is just the way they do things is so different. And this is an excellent example of that. They did decide to bootstrap and have done really well. I think over 1,000 customers at this point have never taken $1 of VC funding. I mean, they've talked to folks, but they just haven't needed to, and for a company of 20 people to reach 11 million in ARR with no debt, with no funding. I mean, they've got cash in the bank. Is almost unheard of. And they've spent a lot of time. You can catch them on podcasts and things like that, talking about how that works. The formula they use to get there. It's not a secret formula.
And it's no surprise. I mean, Haroon's a talented hacker, and I mean, he's basically hacking the cybersecurity business world. And he's always done that. I mean, he has articles about how he goes to RSA and approach that differently from everyone else, how he approaches funding differently, how he approaches customer management. He approaches everything from that unique hacker, very creative, unique problem-solving perspective. And
it's nothing but love and respect. Everything when you read it, it's like, well, yeah, of course, duh.
Right.
But it's not the way everybody else is doing it.
It's brilliant.
I'm sure Adrian will remember this, but a few years back, I was beating both Adrian and Haroon up saying, take money. You're insane not to take money. And I'm chewing on crow, man. This is amazing. 11 million in ARR, 100% bootstrap. Man, you just showed me you don't have to take it to win. Right. Yeah, not even in Silicon Valley. You don't have to take it to win. And if you think about it, had he taken the dilution of ownership, he'd probably have way less money in his pocket now than what that company is worth today, having bootstrapped it from zero. Can we
give Haroon and things like honorary unicorn status? Because I think it's like its own very special unicorn status.
100%. And I should be finding a hat to eat right now because he just showed me what's up.
It's awesome.
What's the official? I feel like it needs to be something other than
not a unicorn.
Though. I don't know what the official bird is of South Africa, but
unicorns are birds.
They have wings. They do have wings.
So I guess
we'll figure that out later, and we'll send them an award. They'll appreciate that.
Yes, we will. Yes,
little inside joke there.
Let's see. Cybersecurity training company platform KnowBe4 has filed for IPO.
Big one. No secret filing. S1 is out there. You can go read it.
I haven't read the S1 yet, but they are kind of fun to read.
They are kind of fun to read, and my SEC muscles have atrophied a bit since I was an analyst. But from what I looked at, it looked like a pretty solid IPO. Their debt, their financials, not certified to have any kind of opinion here. This is not investment advice.
Right.
But they certainly didn't look like WeWork, right?
Yeah. Gotcha.
So question I have on that one, guys, is if I say to you cybersecurity training, can you come up with anybody better? Can you come up with anybody else?
It depends on what type of training.
Nope, just generically. Think about the general market's reaction to this going public, right? I can't think of anything bigger or better or, as broad.
I think probably in terms of revenue size and growth, KnowBe4 is probably in the leading edge of that. I mean, there's other adjacent that are phishing protection plus training, right?
Right. Just pure training, though. Nobody can touch them. So from an investment standpoint, you got a market leader, a big TAM, high growth company. This one seems like a good one, but again,
is that investment advice?
Nope.
Because it kind of sounded like investment advice.
Nope, absolutely not.
I may take that as investment advice.
I might take that as investment advice.
Right, gotcha.
Johnny's back there taking notes.
That's it. We're all going all in.
I'm in hands. Let's go.
acquisitions. We're talking about this one in the break. VMware has acquired Mesh 7. And so Mesh 7 has developed a contextual API behavior security solution based on Envoy. So it sounded to me like VMware had this mesh platform called Envoy, Mesh 7 built on Envoy, and then VMware was like, oh, that's really cool. We should just buy you. And I'm not sure what Envoy is.
Yeah,
Tyler?
I did a whole whopping 30 seconds of research on Envoy. Envoy was created by Lyft, used internally to Lyft to actually do a lot of the service mesh type stuff that Lyft needed. I don't believe it's owned by VMware. I still think it is an open source style solution that's publicly available. So it's an underpinning, and it's being adopted by whoever you said there at the beginning of the
Kubernetes
segment.
Mesh 7.
Yes. Yeah, Mesh 7, sorry.
Gotcha.
I mean, not in terms of what it does, but in terms of like belonging more to the community. Yeah.
And I couldn't understand what they were trying to say in the VMware press release either. I mean,
it's part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It's part of CNCF. Envoy is.
We should do a whole thing on press releases.
We should,
Paul.
Well, part of that problem is I needed to come up to speed on what all the players were and like what it was. I could probably go back and reread it now, even just based on what Tyler just told me, was to get a little better understanding. But it was still not very clear as to what they were trying to communicate. Like, why is this such a big deal?
Envoy is probably a competitor to Istio, which is also an open service mesh model.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Capado acquires New Context. I had not heard of either of these companies. Something about DevSecOps and multi-cloud, but they kind of made this comment like, today's data doesn't live in one cloud. Like, to unlock the full potential of business data, the enterprise has to develop software that is multi-cloud. It sounds like they have multi-cloud solutions and are trying to paint the picture that, well, to be successful in the enterprise software, you've got to be multi-cloud. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Right. I don't think it's a bad thing either. And I see their point, but I think defining it as a requirement may give people a false impression.
And it looks like Capado is entirely Salesforce focused. So it's like a very niche, focused on that. I mean, Salesforce is huge, as far as CRMs go. A lot of people think of it as as a drop-in product, like a bigger, more complex HubSpot, HubSpot.
It's really a platform you develop on more so than something you drop in. Yeah.
There's an entire industry around consultants that build out your Salesforce for you. They customize the fields, the data that you can put into it, your workflows, and it's impressive what you can do with it. But there's a lot of money you got to invest in it, so it doesn't surprise me at all to see, a native DevOps solution just for Salesforce.
Yep. I really want to talk about Linksys and Fortinet, and it's not an acquisition or funding, but I just found it really interesting because they're forming this alliance. Fortinet made a strategic investment of $75 million in Linksys, and Fortinet will appoint a representative on the Linksys board of directors. But it kind of sounded like the alliance was to further secure and optimize performance and management of home networks in today's work from home environment. I sort of predicted this if everyone is going to be not everyone, a lot of people are going to be working from home more so than pre-pandemic. And who makes a device that can help home users be more secure and connect back to the enterprise? I'm like, there needs to be this kind of melding of a consumer product with an enterprise security company. And then I saw this. I was like, oh, this is kind of the first inroads. Like, how do I get these devices that maybe Linksys makes or Fortinet or some partnership, right, to all of my users so they can plug into a network that's more secure by default than what you would get with more traditional like home user gear?
I feel like there's some irony here. Wasn't Linksys owned by an enterprise networking company?
They were owned by Cisco, yeah.
And then spun back out.
And then spun back out. Yep.
So yeah, round two, I guess. Let's try this again, because the problem is definitely there. after the pandemic. I mean, absolutely. There are millions of home networks that are now part of corporate networks,
right?
Effectively.
Isn't this what Meraki was meant to solve, though?
Yeah. A lot of the Aruba too had a lot of that early on, that you basically carry your wireless access point with you, right? And it would tunnel you back in and be your access point wherever you go.
Yeah, but didn't make it that far down.
Yeah.
So I remember,
I used it, and some security engineers used it, but it never made it to let's deploy it out to all 10,000 users.
I worked when I was consulting, I worked with a lot of retailers, and on the enterprise side, worked with some organizations that had sales offices, a lot of small offices where you had 2 or 3 employees, and it was with a lot of the Meraki stuff. I mean, the UTM market, everybody's got something in there, right? There's Sophos, Checkpoint's got something, Palo Alto's got something, and most of them, once you got the subscriptions in there and you bought the hardware, you're talking over $1,000 per location. And it's just not going to work down at the individual employee level. You've got to be around the $100 to $200 price point for that to work at all. And I've not seen anything make it down there except maybe some open source stuff. Maybe Ubiquity is the closest that I've seen that's gotten there with tons of features, very, very configurable and hackable, enterprise features, but also under $200.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. What else?
Fortinet has another story in here.
They made an acquisition. Yeah. Who did they buy? Shield X. Wait.
Yeah.
Is that bot detection?
No, Shield X is microsegmentation.
Ah, gotcha.
And I did some research on this one because
obviously I didn't.
I thought it was interesting because I followed microsegmentation for a little while. I remember the first time I talked to Illumio, my first question was, how is this not suddenly going from managing 8 firewall policies to 8,008 firewall policies? How are you going to handle, because to me this felt a lot like if you remember when app whitelisting was real big in the late 2000s, Bit9 got pretty huge, and you had analysts saying that antivirus was obsolete now, because we're just going to app whitelist everything and untrusted code won't run. And then everybody realized it was a management nightmare, completely unmanageable. If you tried out of the gate, to just lock everything down. Worked very well in these niche use cases where the policy was very clear, very straightforward on how we want to lock things down.
Like OT environments is actually specifically called out in here. Yeah.
Once you get to developers and management folks, they want to just, today they're using OneNote, tomorrow they want to use Evernote, and they're going to get, maybe you can lock them down, but, you're going to go from having, a security management issue to a pissed off employee issue. It's just not going to work.
What we really need is AI ML with zero trust technology on your microservice architecture.
Cloud native
microservice architecture.
The buzzwords, they burn.
Oh, just ridiculous number of buzzwords.
So I took a look at this market, because the deal size wasn't out there, but they only raised $34 million. And looking at some comps here, Palo Alto paid $150 million for Appareto not too long ago on $34.5 million raised. Zscaler paid $31 million on $18 million raised for Edgewise. FireEye paid $13.5 million for CloudVisory. So it really looks like, microsegmentation is really tough to get traction with. I think we can all agree that it's useful technology, but I feel like they're hitting those same issues that app whitelisting hit, where it's just really difficult for customers to implement, to manage those policies, maybe not getting the traction they expected to see in this market, and seeing frankly, terrible returns in this market. So it makes me wonder how Illumio is doing. Their Series A, they've raised $1/3 of $1 billion to date. And, really interesting tech, stuff we would love to do, but I'm not sure if anybody's operationally successful in deploying the stuff and getting it configured.
Let's see. Sonatype had more announcements. Last week, I think we covered one of their acquisitions. Of course, now it's not loading, but they've got this 5-part announcement. It includes the Muse acquisition, 3 product updates, and support for the Nexus community. And now the story won't load because
they have like a community edition. Yeah, it won't load for me either. So I think it's not you, Paul.
Yeah, me either.
I was actually that was the one article I was relying on to load during the show because
it loaded for me. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, what is it listed? Because they listed out 5 different announcements, enhancements to their platform.
Quick look at the announcements. Acquisition of Muse, Nexus Container, a developer-friendly container security solution providing continuous visibility into composition and management of containers from development to delivery to runtime. Infrastructure as code pack.
That's
delivers
new,
out of the
right?
box guidance to assist developers configuring cloud infrastructure and foster compliance with privacy and security standards. Advanced legal pack and Nexus community. So the Muse acquisition gives them breadth of scanning capability into new areas that they couldn't scan for, including probably some deeper container analysis stuff that Muse brought to the table, thus the Nexus container scanning.
Yep.
The infrastructure as code, advanced legal pack, both of those are... so advanced legal pack is actually taking a look at the licenses within your... Yep, and giving you a better legal view than just here's the license. It tells you what it means and how to handle it and all that kind of stuff. Infrastructure as code is the ability to scan other infrastructure technologies, again, probably on the back of Muse. So like Terraform and things like that, the ability to scan that kind of stuff. And then Nexus community, I don't know what that is, just expanding their community capability, I guess. Oh, package of free Nexus.
It's a community edition. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's a community edition, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, so that's always very cool when somebody throws out a community edition there, lets people get familiar with the product. If you're a small like developer of one shop, now you can get some of the benefits there for free.
Yeah, I really like that Sonatype is expanding the breadth of their offering finally, right? Getting into additional areas besides just software composition, which has been the core of what they've done for a long time. So I think it's a really smart move for them to continue to broaden their product portfolio as they look to grow.
Stellar Cyber's Open XDR eases big cybersecurity data storage woes. They kind of paint that scaling storage is the problem with SIM and XDR.
It though?
It could be, and yes, I get that, but it's not the primary problem in my opinion. And I think you guys might agree, right? The problem with XDR and SIM is like getting the right information to the right people that's accurate.
Right. Doing useful things with the information.
Yes. Not so much like, how do I scale my storage to handle it? Like, I think there's a lot of different ways you could skin that cat, and a lot of providers that can help you with that. I mean, Google's platform. What is Google's platform for doing that is great at it. There's a lot of ways.
Chronicle.
Chronicle. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I think it. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's a problem. We hear people complain all the time about their Splunk bills and
storage. Yeah.
How much they're paying to store stuff in SIM but I think it's much less of an issue these days than it used to be, and it's an operational issue, which makes this a little bit less interesting for us.
Yeah.
Because there's not really any kind of improvement on the functionality of the product here. There's no security angle here. This is mainly like, hey, we'll save you some money, and sure, that's going to mean something to somebody, but not the most exciting XDR announcement we'll see this year.
Any of your stories, Adrian, you wanted to cover? You had a couple trends in there.
You had one in there I thought was interesting, that Philippe is retiring from Qualys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, due to health issues. Yeah, regards go out to him, his family, and everyone at Qualys, of course. It was prominent in the news feeds that he is announcing his resignation as CEO.
Yeah, and I think he can do so comfortably. I mean, he's been there for 20 years. He's done quite a bit with Qualys. You should be proud of what he's built there.
Sumedh is absolutely 1,000% qualified as well.
100% agree with that. Yeah, I mean, as much as I loved Philippe and the work he's done there, I think Sumedh is going to be able to take them up a notch into the next level, and I think it's a very positive thing. Yep.
I also think Philippe was a CC Mail, like in 98. And I remember working with Lotus Notes in the 90s and having like CC, knowing that I think the mail component in Notes was from CC Mail.
And Philippe is a character too. I think most people that have met Philippe have a Philippe story of some kind.
Yeah. He was on the show Paul Security Weekly at least once. I don't remember the episode, but you can go back and dig it out. It's a good one. Let's see what else in the news this week.
So I created a new category here in mine, just called trends. Things that I think are going to have an impact to enterprise security, to vendors, things like that. The first of those was the U.S. Government offering what essentially look like buybacks. They're not calling them buybacks, but buybacks on Chinese telco equipment. To try and create an incentive for people to get off that equipment and not to use it. They mentioned specifically ZTE and Huawei, but they also said that they're going to change the list or expand the list or something like that. So we'll see who they've decided is the boogeyman, next week when they update that. And then Google talking about ditching cookies in Chrome, I thought was pretty interesting. What they're trying to do is shift the way ads are targeted from individuals to groups of like-minded individuals, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I've linked in the actual white paper. It gets quite technical. It goes over my head pretty early on, but they call it FLOC, Federated Learning of Cohorts.
So is that, I didn't read the article, and since you at least skimmed it, I have a question. Does that mean that they are going to do the grouping on their side? And so based off of your activities, you'll get your response into
is the
cohort.
Same. Your response is the same as most. There's a lot of trust us. We'll do this right. Baked into this announcement.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, as a CMO of a company, that completely changes how business will get done. In a really, really aggressive and difficult way.
Yeah, Cloudflare had a similar announcement that they've got a product for WordPress that allows you to collect usage data and get meaningful insights without invading visitors' privacy, which is kind of along the same lines, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, we'll just trust Google to hold everybody's information for us, and they can be the determiner of who is what.
Oh, that's right, because they're not evil, right? Or wait, they're not.
Yeah, exactly. They're not evil at all.
And looks like the social media companies, the big tech, got another friendly invite to the Capitol to talk with have a chat with Congress about surveillance advertising. There's actually a lot of stuff on the docket. I think there's surveillance advertising. And how it's been abused, and specifically, I think, and this is going on tomorrow, I think, and specifically talking about how social media was used to plan the attack on the Capitol back in January.
Interesting. I think NFTs are really interesting. I kind of like where you're going with this, Adrian, because it's much like when blockchain first came out. We're like, hold on, wait a minute, what is that? And then that quickly pivoted to attackers taking over infrastructure in support of cryptocurrency mining. NFTs potentially could have a similar impact.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm doing is following the money here. You know, I mean, digital artists just sold something for $69 million, I want to say it was. An NFT, basically a JPEG.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, so I watched a video on this yesterday. Owning an NFT of artwork, specifically, and obviously NFTs can be used for other things as well here. like maybe in-game items and things like that. They're talking about video games and fashion. But right now it's blowing up in the art world. And it means that you own a copy of the artwork, but you do not own copyright to that. The original artist still retains that copyright. And
it's blockchain technology that's enforcing this ownership and licensing.
Yeah. So right? The NFT itself gets written to the blockchain, and that NFT, as far as I understand, are using Ethereum to do this to create a contract. A digital contract that basically says, yes, you own this object, but there's nothing, so yeah, you just paid $69 million for the new Mona Lisa, but there's nothing that says that artist can't go out next week and then sell 1,000 more of those for $10 a piece and call them prints or something like that. Of course, the artist isn't incentivized to do that because then that diminishes the value of their work. So it's super interesting. And the reason I keep including it here is because with all the money going into this, the fraud is going to follow.
Yeah,
it's only
already
a matter
happened.
of time.
There was a site that was buy, sell, trade NFT, basically, that got hacked and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we covered that PSW last week.
You still own, I think, Adrian, you still own like let's say you bought that first Mona Lisa and he releases 10 more copies of it. You can still own the timestamp wise, you can still own the first one, which should have some impact on value. But I think what we're seeing here at the highest level, I believe in what it's doing conceptually, but at the highest level, it's a tulip style bubble, right? Of the 70s or 80s or whenever that was when the cost of tulips skyrocketed through the roof. This is going to come crashing down. Do not be the bag holder on these NFTs. I do like
it's speculative. It's just like any other market with collectibles. The same rules.
That sounds like investment advice.
I do like Ethereum to invest in and buy Ethereum, but I am not giving advice.
Cautionary advice. Don't get in too early on these NFTs. Yeah.
These are just general observations.
General observations. That's right. No advice.
A final note, open source tools. Console Me for AWS permissions.
Yeah, so another interesting tool that popped out of Netflix, and what I found interesting about it is, this isn't just for managing IAM roles in AWS and permissions and things like that for administrators, but it looks like it aims to be user facing as well. So this is an open source tool you could use to do some self-service stuff around managing permissions, passwords, and things like that for employees or, even customers, I assume.
Also,
interesting looking tool.
StackPulse released a free edition of their reliability platform, allowing DevOps and SREs to the on-call process of identifying and responding to service incidents and outages, making that easier. That's a free edition.
Free stuff is good.
Also, CTO.ai launches a serverless Kubernetes platform because we needed more Kubernetes platforms, I guess. Oh, the one I wanted to pull out from here, closing note. It says the platform was created to address the estimated $300 billion lost in developer productivity every year, much of which comes from complex modern cloud tooling. I thought that was an interesting statistic. There is an asterisk there. Hopefully they back that up with some kind of, I don't know what research they had to back that up with. There is a reference there, but.
Yeah, that's a heck of a claim.
Much like valuations, research is not required to make claims.
Yeah. I do. I mean, numbers aside, I do think that messaging on loss in developer productivity due to troubleshooting complex platform issues. I mean, Trey talked about that in the top of the segment, in the top of the show. I do think that is a problem.
That asterisk does not seem to go anywhere. I think somebody copied and pasted out of the original press release.
I did. Yeah, that's a quote from the original press release.
Right. It's not your asterisk. It's them, and
There's no.
I'm looking at the original
reference.
press release, and it doesn't.
Gotcha.
It doesn't go anywhere. So they put an asterisk there, but it's not really helping. Productivity is a really tough thing to even measure. Much less make any claims of benefits based on it. I mean, you really want to improve developer productivity? Fix email. Forget Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Like email, fix email, and you improve everybody's productivity.
Very true.
But anyway.
Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Adrian and Tyler, fun as always. We'll see everyone next time.